All right. Hey, so welcome and thank you for joining our first inaugural, I guess you could call it inaugural or initial PD on the Patio session. We are super excited that you're all here today. And our team is going to come on and introduce themselves. I know you're going to have lots of questions, so we are going to have two things happening. You can put your questions in the chat. Because there's more than a few of us, myself and our team working, we can respond in the chat as best we can. But we are also going to have a document where you can put your questions, and as a community, we can also go in and perhaps answer those questions as well. Please realize that today's session is completely optional. None of us are getting paid. So with that being said, I think that it's important that we recognize that you're all taking time out of your day to further your education. And we honor that. So thanks for joining us. And hopefully you're all finding some space on your own patio to enjoy today's session. All right, you want to get started?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Hi, all. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Carrie Cooner, and I'm on the far left there. I am a member of our digital curriculum team and an elementary teacher in the district for 20 plus years.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Carter. I'm also part of the digital curriculum team. I like that you threw in the 20 plus years, Carrie, because now I'm having to do math on the spot. I want to say I'm in year, 16 for myself, and ELA teacher in the background before switching over to tech integration. And I look forward to talking to you guys today. I want to preface really quickly because I see a lot of comments coming in on the chat. We are going to be talking predominantly today about CDL as it stands from like ODE guidance, and we don't have a ton of background information on the framework and pieces that are coming in from TNL as they are still working on it. We'll try to answer all of your questions to the best of our abilities, but just know that our goal and mission in the next couple of weeks is to try and get you guys ready and up to speed for all the tech components that might be useful and necessary as we start in the fall. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Awesome. Hey, again, welcome. I'm so excited all of you are here. Thanks for taking time out of your busy morning. Again, my name is Chris Giles, and my role specifically is to obviously support and implement Canvas across our school district, but I also work with Nicole and Carrie and Jen and the rest of our team as part of basically integrating technology into our classrooms. I've been a classroom teacher for over 17 years, including 2 years in Brazil. And I've been doing online learning and teaching for a while. And I'm excited to be here with you. And like we said, we're going to give you a really good framework, and then we're open to some good conversation today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Mann, and I work with digital curriculum, and I also support secondary math. I've been teaching, I think might be year 21 for me. I started out most of my career teaching middle school math. And I'm looking forward to working with you all and helping you out. So let us know what questions you have and how we can support you.
I'm Kristen McCartney. I'm part of the digital curriculum team. This is, I think, year 18. I spent a fair amount of my time as a middle school science teacher and then an MYP coordinator and design teacher.
And we will be providing the slide deck for you guys as well. And I know that we saw someone in the chat ask, even if we're not getting paid, can we get credit? Of course. So we'll have a sign in at the end as well for everyone.
But we'll also have just a short evaluation at the end as well. So with that being said, let's get started. So if you've been here for a while in our school district, you know that us, like every other school district across the country and across the world pretty much, dramatically shifted learning from February to like March. And so we kind of went into this process, what we consider emergency remote teaching, or my favorite term is called crisis teaching, where we basically really had to shift workflow and our mindset and everything into that position. And so really what this is about today is kind of sharing about where we were, where we are, and then where we're going. And so where we were is that crisis teaching. We did our best to capture that moment and do our best to provide instruction to our students, to connect with them, and to make sure that they felt loved and supported. You know, and you can see the slides. Basically, we did the same things as classroom teachers. We've checked in with our students. We made sure we did some engagement. Unfortunately, it wasn't intentionally planned. It was reactionary. So our goal today is to kind of help out with a framework to kind of shift towards that crisis teaching process to what we're at right now, which is basically this comprehensive distance learning, which I think actually, I love the term CDL, because if you think about it, you actually kind of need a special like process or license in order to really understand what's going on. And so our goal today is to kind of share that today. And you can see it's purposeful. And we're also going to work on like the same things. We're still going to be checking in. We're going to go ahead and assess, give feedback. So those are things we're sharing today, but I want to let you know that comprehensive distance learning, according to the ODE, is not something that should be confused with distance learning for all, which is that teaching, that crisis teaching we did in the spring. And then where we're going, a statement that I really want to make sure that everybody understands is right now we don't have a manual. Nobody's been giving a manual. We haven't received a manual that's saying, here's exactly how you do online learning. And so our goal is to give you a framework for that. But with that being said, one thing that the ODE has said that I love was that it requires ongoing reflection and iteration in order to assure deep learning. So as teachers right now in this space, the manual that we are creating is based heavily on our own reflection. So if you want to go ahead there, Nicole. So this document is not a secret. We're going to put it in the chat in a few minutes. You can go look at it. It's 40 some pages long, but there are a couple of specific pages that as teachers you could really focus in on and kind of have a really great understanding as to where the ODE is coming from, and then help to kind of get your mindset set in place. But that being said, the one thing we as a team really strongly value is the humanizing of that experience. And so comprehensive distance learning is humanized and intentional online learning. And that simply means as teachers, we are going to be heavily engaged in not only connecting with our students, engaging with them, but also making that personal connection. There's lots of research to say that students who will hear their teacher's voice and see their teacher's faces are going to be more checked into learning than just watching some random video of some stranger explaining a concept. So just keep that in mind. There's a balance. It's okay. You can use recorded videos from somebody else. I do it all the time, but there is a need for you to be part of that process as well.
One of the visuals that I found really helpful in the ODE document was around instructional time, and how more than 50% of when we think about your workday from 8 to 4, more than 50% of that will be teacher facilitated, but that can be synchronous or asynchronous. And we'll talk later when we discuss what teaching looks like, how you can do some of that so that it doesn't feel like it's all sit and deliver to your students. The other portion of your day and your students' day is applied learning. And then when you think about some of your time where you don't have student contact, that would be teacher professional development, connections with families, and providing support.
Now, when you first read this ODE guideline, right, 47 pages of just page-turning, riveting information, it seems pretty daunting and overwhelming. So what we've done to organize the courses for our PD on the Patio series, and just going ahead, we tried to narrow it down to more comprehensible, manageable buckets of information. So we have picked these 5 nice one-worders to kind of, these are the things you should be doing, right? And you're really lucky that we didn't make it into an educational acronym for you. So these are just 5 separate words. We have connect, engage, teach, check, and respond. And underneath each one of those, we've come up with a guiding question that should center your thinking. So in the first one, how do you connect with your students and family and meet the needs of your classroom community? So I know that was a big push for the spring, and obviously that push continues. Next one is to engage. How do you enable the whole group communication and collaboration in a virtual classroom between students and teachers? So how do you make sure that kids are interested and jumping into the learning and able to contact you and ask questions and talk with their peers? I know my children were really missing that portion last year, having the ability to interact with other students. Obviously the intentional teaching, how you're delivering your content in that online classroom environment. The next one's check. So how you're checking for understanding, which we always do, and providing feedback to your students. And we'll be talking about some of the ways, and there are more courses. These are such huge topics. There's no way we could possibly cover all of this today. So there are a number of other courses that will give more specific information you can dive into. And I love the other part of this. So not only checking the students' understanding, but also reflecting upon your own teaching, right? You do that in the class instinctively. You can see, you can get that, the nods and the little looks in their eyes that you can tell they're with you, but how we're going about doing that online and reflecting upon your own practices. And finally, responding. And this is, okay, I've seen what they're doing, I've seen what they're telling me. How am I going about differentiating and making sure that my instruction is accessible to all students in my class? So what are those responsive teaching moves? How am I intentionally planning my lessons to be sure all students can access that information, be it language, level, visual, verbal, and then at the end, obviously, some teacher reflection. So those are the big buckets, and you might have noticed those when you're looking at the different courses that we've kind of put, okay, this course is really a teaching course. This course is a connecting course. We're going to be using those buckets moving forward to guide our thinking.
And then, of course, too, we want to make sure that we give credence to the climate of today's times as we move forward into the fall. I think every single piece that we do, we should be guiding our decision making with that equity lens. So a big, huge part of that engagement bucket is really validating student voice, and it's thinking about making, as we've said, humanizing the course and making it accessible to our students. So the equity lens becomes a huge, important part and piece of everything that we do moving forward. And so we just want to make sure that you guys know that we will be focusing on that, and we will be talking about it as we move forward in a lot of different capacities. And so it just needs to become a part of our kind of daily decision making.
Awesome. Hey, and by the way, your questions in the chat are awesome. They're super valid. And I want to know that all of us on our team, and when I say our team, like the people who are here today, including, you know, even our supervisors, we all have these same questions and we all have these same wonderings. So I want you to feel like it's a place to ask the questions, but it's also a place to feel like we should have some grace. We don't have all those answers yet, and we're hoping that we can eventually get to those point where we get those answers. But please keep asking the questions, because that's what's going to help us formulate more answers. So with that being said, the connect piece, and this is my favorite part, because this is the part where as classroom teachers, you do naturally. And so I think it's, take a second and just kind of, it's that affirmation. As a teacher, I do some of these things already. I check in, I connect, and I do this thing. So as a classroom teacher, the beginning of school year, your goal is to simply do as much as you can with connecting. You're going to try to use as many tools as possible to connect with every one of your students. Eventually, once you have that connection made, your goal is to be able to establish some type of sustainable routine. I don't think, in my opinion, it's sustainable to have 5 or 6 different tools that you're going to constantly use all year to connect. You're going to want to narrow those tools down. And then when I say connect, I'm talking about not only just connecting with your individual student, but hopefully connecting with that family. So just a kind of a side note, I might use text messages, email, phone calls, all of those things at my disposal. But eventually on my checklist with my students, I'm going to narrow the scope of those tools so that I can make this a sustainable communication tool. And for those who are in middle school and high school, we'll be using Canvas as one of those tools. Zoom will most likely be the other tool, and you might choose to use email as well. But the goal is to narrow the scope of how you're constantly communicating with your students. And with that being said, once you get that connection piece going, that is how you're able to go ahead and establish those procedures, routines, and the class climate. But you got to connect first. All right, let's move on, my friend. Mm-hmm. So do me a favor, in the chat, here's our question, and I'll read it as well as you can read it yourself. But in the chat, please go ahead and respond to this question. Share what's worked for you or did not work while working with connecting with your students and families in spring. And it's okay to share this didn't work. That's the space. This is the space for that sharing to take place. But if you were like, ooh, this is a nugget that worked awesome, share it. We want to know it. So So with that being said, our next thing is connecting in and checking with the community and the communication. So again, I'm not expecting you to read all of these slides. We will provide these notes and this information for you, but prioritizing that connection, because I've been saying this for a long time, and this is my experience as a parent, as a middle school child, a parent of a middle school child, and as a teacher. I can't expect my students to engage in online learning if I haven't connected with them offline. And that, of course, is, as classroom teachers, we do that anyways, right? We make sure we connect with our students. And once we have that connection and we've established that relationship and they begin to trust and see the routines that we've put in our classroom, then they're going to go ahead and be in a place where they can do some academics. So I'm not going to tell you to not do academic at the beginning of the year, but I am going to strongly advise that your focus is definitely making those connections, getting that pipeline established, and then begin to build those routines, procedures, and establishing that classroom culture, the norms and stuff. And of course, Zoom will be a huge part of that. And again, we're going to be doing sessions specifically on these tools. But if I can impart one good piece of advice, I would suggest starting out with small groups. And that's just much more manageable. I know we like to teach in front of our whole class, but we're going to have to kind of make some shifts and some compromises to make this more sustainable and more successful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we saw teachers reflect on a lot in the spring, and I'm kind of seeing that as well in the comments right now, is the idea of that engagement factor. And as I was kind of starting to respond to people, the narrative is different for the fall than it was in the spring. There is going to be attendance taken, although we don't know how that works per se yet. There will be grades going, but we don't have the guidelines for that yet. We're waiting on them. So the engagement piece, we're hoping will be a little bit different in the fall because that narrative is starting to shift. But I think one piece that's going to help us across the board is this movement towards consistency within our online platforms. What we heard from a lot of the community, both the students as well as the parents, was that they were really having a hard time navigating between all of the different things that were being used. So we are working on trying to come up with those kind of guidelines for both Seesaw and Canvas. And I think also too, narrowing it down to just the Seesaw and Canvas options is going to help as well. But it then also moves into, as we've been talking about, this humanizing aspect. How are we making the course more accessible for our students and making it more engaging at the same time? So we're going to need to kind of build on that equity piece too, like building on the student strengths, really zeroing in on culture and identity and lifting those up, as well as those SEL and community building pieces. I think we all have known for a really long time that that SEL component is going to be a huge factor as we move into the fall with kids that we haven't necessarily met face to face. So that all being said, those pieces I think would be top priority, but then we also start to move into more student choice and allowing kids to go at the pace that fits them. And then as Chris said before, those smaller group interactions will start to become really key, which in another bucket, we kind of talk about those kind of check and respond pieces. So meeting students where they're at and engaging them where they're at. We also have seen major engagement and usage within discussion threads. So especially for our secondary people, as well as maybe people that are in the 4th and 5th grade that are thinking about potentially using Canvas. The discussion threads on Canvas, we saw huge engagement for students. There's a lot you can do within that to provide the ability for people to do peer-to-peer interactions, which again, we know that they severely missed in the spring. And those peer-to-peer interactions do become quite powerful when we give them guidance and a framework for how to do that. So ODE is really big. That guideline, that PDF that we gave you, they talk a lot about honoring those individual student experiences, and really thinking about the culturally responsive practices, which we will be having trainings on those in pre-service, in our mandatory pre-service time period. So a lot of what you're going to be seeing being offered in the next couple of weeks is predominantly around this consistent usage with the online tools and the tech integration piece. But just know a lot of the equity build, a lot of the culturally responsive build, that's going to be coming as we get closer and closer, and especially a closer look at all of the content resources that your district TOSAs and other teachers are busy working on right now. So again, that community piece kind of factors in. And then also, like we said, using those online softwares to engage our students is going to be really helpful. We will be giving you specific PD in Seesaw and Canvas that we have labeled or listed as either basic, intermediate, and advanced, and they're part of a series, so we'll be building on those skills as we continue to go, including talking about making your own videos for those of you that are really interested in that term that's been bandied about quite a bit lately, flipped classroom. So one thing that we know too, in addition to engaging in students' culture and identities, is also kind of breaking out of typical routines, engaging with creativity and humor. I know that I lived in a world where I was just using paper and pencil and a black and white copier. So as soon as the shift to online started happening and I realized that I could make and design things that were much more engaging visually, I started to take advantage of it. It technically was a slow buildup, but now I understand how important information design is when I'm creating content for my students. They are savvy consumers of information. So if we're continuing to give them stuff that looks like it was created in the 90s, they are not going to engage with us. So that is something too that we'll be paying attention to. We have a series for how to use Google Slides. I saw in the beginning, a lot of you were very interested in that engaging waiting room that we created. So we'll be giving you a basic, intermediate, and advanced option on Google Slides as well, so that we can start to talk about those design principles. But you have access to using things like memes and GIFs and all sorts of vibrant visuals to connect to students. They need less text and more visuals as we start to create our content. So just be keeping those in mind as a part of that engagement piece. Okay, shifting over. Yeah,
Nicole,
go ahead.
can I ask a real quick question? Just to clarify, I think when you said less text, it was more, I think you were saying like not large chunks of text to read, right?
Right, exactly. As we start to build in directions and content, whether that's in Seesaw activities or assignments on Canvas, we need to be thinking about the design of that information. Students are not going to sit there and read huge paragraphs and chunks of text. They need it broken down. Bullet points are important, large font, and visuals. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Thanks. And a lot of what Nicole just mentioned dovetails really nicely as we transition kind of from engage into teach. With teach, we're thinking about our synchronous and our asynchronous options. Like Nicole mentioned, we want to be consistent in our online platforms and thinking about how we're delivering that content in an online environment. We want to build with really intentional design, thinking from where we're, take that back. We want to know where we're going and then plan backwards from there. We want to consider longer student-driven projects, be really, really clear with what our learning targets and rubrics are. This is when we start to think about our user, it's not just our students, but it's also our parents. So we need to be really crystallized in what we want them to get out of so that our students know really what they need to produce. And then build in student reflection on growth so that they can be actively engaged in this process as well. From ODE, they, and I agree, we want to make sure that we're providing really clear learning purpose, that we're explaining to students what they're doing and what the outcome is, and including families in that communication. And we want to be clear in what support students can expect during that distance learning. And I think this comes back to one of the questions that got asked earlier about some of the difference between the teacher-directed and then the supported learning experiences. We want to make sure that we're communicating with our students and our families what they can be expecting from us in terms of support, as well as what we're asking them to do. So I mentioned earlier that at least 50% of the instructional time needs to be teacher facilitated. And I went a little bit like that. And then I started to look at what that might actually be. So there's synchronous, where I'm doing full group, but it might also be peer interaction. It might be two-way communication, whether that's email or texting or little videos, small group breakouts, and then individual office hours. And then asynchronous might be my Canvas, my Seesaw, quick videos that I've made and embedded into one of my learning platforms that my students can then access. There was a question earlier about applied learning experiences, and I think if we've got time during Q&A, I will come back to that part. And then lastly, like Nicole was mentioning, when I'm thinking about that engagement. And when I'm thinking about teaching, I need to be really, really intentional in my lesson design. I need to be thinking about what information I want my kids to have and then prioritizing that, breaking it into small pieces so that it's not text heavy, that my students can digest it. So that means mini lessons. It means thinking about where I want to go and going screen by screen so that my students are taking it in small digestible pieces and then taking advantage of those bullets and numbered lists.
Okay, so next on the list is checking for understanding and feedback, and also time for teacher reflection. This is where formative assessment can be super valuable. And when you think about formative assessment, it could be very informal. It could be as simple as you're in a Zoom and you do a Zoom poll to check in on your students' understanding. You could use some of our various platforms to check in with students. There are some formative assessment options with Seesaw and quizzes in Canvas and Go Formative, and then just some fun apps like Kahoot could be a fun way. You want to also provide some time for students to check in with you if they are confused or hitting a frustration point. Give that feedback consistently throughout the week, and have it be timely. So if you're giving lessons, make sure that you're somehow acknowledging that it has been, you've seen it, and then lastly, reflecting and iterating on your practice. Don't be afraid to change things up. If something doesn't work, take time to assess, talk with colleagues, and figure out how you can change it. Just because you start out one way doesn't mean you can't change things. Providing feedback can be daunting and overwhelming. So when you're planning your lessons, think about 1 or 2 goals at the most. And then plan backwards from there, and that will allow you to focus in on just 1 or 2 things with your students, and that will be more manageable for you. There's audio and video feedback options, which can be super useful when you are wanting to batch your feedback. So if you notice that students are having trouble with something, there's many students having trouble with the same thing, you can create little videos, 1 or 2 or 3 minute videos to kind of target that feedback. And one thing that I've had to get over during this remote learning time was just being okay with doing 1 take on a video. And sometimes people would ask questions and it would take me 15-20 minutes to respond with text, but I could just do a quick little video in a few minutes and take 1 take and share it out, and it's perfect is the enemy of done. We just need to be more efficient with our feedback so that it's easier to get feedback to students. And on that efficiency and feedback, Flash Feedback, which is an awesome podcast on cults of pedagogy, I would highly recommend taking a listen to it. They speak with Matthew Johnson, and he did his master's thesis on feedback, and he has some really good tips on how to make it easier for you. So teacher reflection, as I said, is a really big part of your practice, and using these as your guiding principles when reflecting. It's definitely a innovative and iterative process. Thinking about what reflections you had on your remote learning from the spring, and what would you transfer over to the fall, what worked for you and that you want to keep using. You put that in the chat, give some people ideas, that would be great.
And I think too, like, there's so many people that have joined us today and the chat is blowing up. And so we do have quite a few on the panel today. We're trying to grab as many questions as we can, moving them over into that Q&A dialogue. So we'll just make sure that you guys have access to that, because as we're kind of giving the PD, it's hard. And I'm finding that we're kind of being pulled in a lot of different directions to try and answer you right away, and then also kind of back through and check those pieces. So we will get those questions answered. Just make sure that you kind of know that you can get that in. We'll kind of, how about we hyperlink it in the teacher source course?
Yeah, we can, I think we can do some of that. And I think it's also important, and kind of, this is the theme. And I think if we could come up with a theme, and I think we talked about it as a team, grace and mercy. The reality is we don't know all the answers yet as a team even. And then as teachers, we don't know all the answers. So I only say that because, you know, Jen had just talked about, you know, keeping things simple. I think it's okay to be simple.
Our last bucket that we have before we open up for more questions is, okay, you've taught the content, you've checked for understanding. In this remote world, how are you going to respond to the needs of all of your different learners? So historically, that's been pulling a small group over to either do an individual conferencing or small group conferencing to meet their needs, their specific needs. Taking a look at that assessment data, perhaps it is a review lesson that they need. Perhaps there is a beautifully scaffolded supports that you've put into place for that student. Also thinking about the students that are ready for the next step, and have you designed your instruction and your content so that they're able to go ahead and take those steps forward without your needing to hold their hand through every single step. So we have there that Seesaw and Canvas will be our central hubs for students accessing materials and turning in materials. Responding. One of the things that's really important, it's in the ODE guidelines, is how that you're going to respond through your intentional lesson design. I always think about those mini lessons that you teach kids at the beginning of the year, like, right, how do they go find this, and what do they do if they have a question, and all of those things. We need to teach all of those mini lessons in our online format. So do students know how to find what they need to find, whether that's on Seesaw, whether that's in a Google slide that you have organized, that information is clear and not so overwhelming and daunting that it's difficult for students to navigate. They're going to need to know the criteria, just like they do in the classroom, for what it's going to take to be successful with exemplars, rubrics. How do they find the feedback, all of that wonderful targeted feedback that you're providing to them? How do they find that, access it, make modifications on their projects as a result? How are students able to advocate for help? So what is again, a mini lesson, how do they contact you, whether that's through office hours or messaging or notes on their document? And again, how can students self-pace themselves through some of the content? So do you have extensions ready to go for those kids who need it? We talked already about that, reflecting on data and making sure that you have interventions in place to meet the needs of all of your students. There's a great example on this next slide here. We talked a little bit about humanizing the experience, and I know it seems pretty simple, but this is on the front of their course, and these two instructors made sure that they had their face there. And I know there's a ton going around with Bitmoji classrooms, and I am super not comfortable having my face on a video screen, but that's such a nice humanizing touch that they get to. And you have to think, these students haven't had you. Like last year, you knew primarily a number of the students in your class, for most of us. And then when this all happened, you already had a relationship with a number of those students. This will be different in that you need to provide that face-to-face human touch. So if we watch this example really quickly, these teachers just are navigating, right? Here's my name, here's where you're gonna go. But the fact that they don't have it in text, in video, really makes it a nice touch.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our homepage. I'm Mike Smetshammer.
And I'm Tracy Shalin.
Click the Start Here button to go to the first page in our Getting Started module.
This module will get you oriented to our class.
We'll see you there.
right? Like, I know that's uncomfortable for me to video myself as well, but what a nice touch versus hopping onto a homepage and just having a whole bunch of text staring at you and a bunch of buttons. That just adds a really nice human touch to it. So making sure that you've really thought through the information design, right? Kids are not overwhelmed. It's easy to find. They know where to go. Humanizing, making sure that they have access points, making sure that there are videos or there are, whenever possible, for kids to be able to see you and to hopefully see each other. And making sure that you have an equity and accessibility lens when you're creating all of your online content. The next slide has a great example from a teacher. She is Denise Modlai Williams, and she actually has recorded this little video for her students. She's a teacher of English at San Diego's Miramar College, and she is teaching speakers of other languages. And she just did this really simple, right, not fancy edited little piece here that was made on Clips, which is a free Apple app, and she just created this little video, but she put in the closed captioning to help out with language acquisition. So if we can just watch this little short video, she's just going to show students where to find her.
Hi to all my online students. Here we are starting week 2. I just pulled up onto campus and I wanted to tell you everything's live on Canvas. The module's ready to go.
Sorry, we don't need to watch too much. I just wanted to make sure that we saw the closed caption and how that worked.
Hey, just a real quick question, Nicole. So there's a lot of chat going on, and I feel like we really we're going to share more about the humanizing, but an important component is this, and I don't want to tell you as a teacher how you have to personalize your space, your learning space. But as far as Canvas and Seesaw being the 2 chosen platforms, our goal is to be consistent and similar in the usage across the district. That means that every teacher will get a very similar template. Just to kind of keep things consistent. That doesn't mean that you can't personalize it or customize it to fit, you know, the welcoming space that you want to create as a classroom teacher. But with that being said, it is going to be uncomfortable for all of us. I mean, Nicole and I and most of our team have been doing Zooms nonstop and putting our faces out there, and it is uncomfortable. But I want you to know that our goal is to support you. I don't want to tell you to do something if it makes you feel uncomfortable, but I want to encourage you to take that risk if it means supporting our students. And so I want you to know that as a team, that's our goal. We're here to help you and support you. So please don't feel like what you're hearing today is like another book thrown at you that you have to do these things. We are here to support and just give information.
Okay, so it's that time for us to kind of pare down, think about anything that needs to be addressed right away. I do know I was trying to respond, and maybe Jen or Kristen can jump on because I know it's something that they're trying to moderate and facilitate. But someone asked a while back in the chat about spaces where we can connect as teachers and share what worked and what didn't work. And I know that we were going back and forth on what to finally name. We were thinking, since, you know, the whole theme is PD on the patio, we were like sip and share. Tea on the patio and all sorts of different places, but we are going to be providing you a space because we do know that we did that for grade levels, for elementary at least, that was highly visited and accessed, and teachers really seem to like it. So we were going to be providing that for you guys. I don't know if Jen and Kristen can speak to when that's happening and what we finally named it so people can find it on TeacherSource.
I think we named it Afternoon Tea and Chat. Jen and I will be hosting this Thursday at 1. Maybe I'll be on my patio because it'll be nice and shady then.
I think I'll be there too, for sure,
yeah,
on my patio as well.
Yeah, and this is a time to come share what worked, share strategies that worked. Some of the best learning that I got to do in the spring was just listening to teachers have conversations about some of the stuff that was frustrating and then the iterations that came from it and some of the success and that they had because of that. And a lot of it came from collaborating with their teammates or with other people across the district.
Yeah. And real quickly,
Can I add one more thing to that?
Go ahead, Jen.
Chris?
Yeah.
We were just going to add that we would probably do some breakout rooms so that you could be with like grades, middle, high, or early elementary and upper elementary.
What I mentioned earlier about creating consistency and similarity, we're working on our simple document. We're trying to make things simple and flexible enough for teachers to have room to be able to change, you know, maybe a homepage a little bit. But unfortunately, in a pandemic, it's really challenging to have too many options. So we're really trying to narrow the scope of those options down so that our students feel more consistent and we support our parents, because all of us in this room are also probably parents as well. So I don't want you stressed at home about, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Are you going to change my workflow? No. As a classroom teacher who's using Canvas right now, currently, you can build in your own Canvas course, and that is fine. And then you're just going to be bringing that content in, and we're going to be offering a lot of sessions on that. And to clarify, as of now, Canvas will be middle school and high school, but there is the options for schools to decide if grades 4 and 5 are making those choices. Now, I'm not making this a blanket statement. The best part of communication would be probably speaking with your principal or administrator if you're in elementary school. And Carrie and I will be doing PDs, delivering that for our elementary friends. And our goal is really to help support the consistent and similar experience that our students and parents are going to be will be experiencing. We want all of you to enjoy the rest of your day. And remember the PD on the patio, our attitude towards that is to make it light, fun, and engaging. And that's our goal.
And it doesn't matter if you have a patio or not.
No, it doesn't. No, patio is optional. So anyways, we love all of you. Like, literally, you are our heart's desire to support you. So love you. Thank you for attending. And we're going to end the show, and we'll talk to all of you later.